$150 million. The fork slipped from my mother's hand. It hit the porcelain plate with a crack that echoed louder than 20 years of silence. The Christmas lights blinked red and green across her bloodless face. My brother's jaw went slack, wine glass frozen halfway to his lips. The turkey sat there steaming between us, untouched, while the room held its breath. That worthless company he'd mocked 30 seconds ago? I'd just sold it for more money than our entire family would see in 10 lifetimes. But that moment, watching my mother's face drain of color as she counted the zeros, that was nothing compared to what it cost me to get there. My name is Emily. I'm 26 years old. And last Christmas, I watched my entire childhood flip in one sentence. Tell me, have you ever been invisible in your own family? Not neglected in the obvious way, but erased in the small moments that add up to a lifetime? Where every achievement you earn gets a distracted "that's nice, honey," while your siblings' mediocrity gets a parade? That was my life for 20 years. I was the background noise. The extra chair at the dinner table. The daughter my mother forgot to photograph because she was too busy capturing my brother's every breath. For most of my life, I believed the story they told me: "You'll be fine, Emily. You don't need what he needs." I was wrong. Not about being fine, I became more than fine. I was wrong about what those words actually meant. They meant, "We don't have to try for you." And the night I finally made them see me? It shattered more than just that Christmas dinner. If you want to know how a daughter her own mother dismissed for decades built a $150 million empire in silence, walked back into that house one last time, and detonated the truth like a bomb at the holiday table, and what it cost everyone, including me, stay until the end. Because this isn't a revenge story. It's a survival story that happened to have the perfect ending. 1 to 3:30, The Golden Child versus the Ghost. I wasn't always the woman who could stop a room with 2 words and a bank statement. At 8 years old, I was just the quiet kid clutching a chipped plastic cup in the kitchen doorway, watching my brother's 13th birthday party like it was a royal coronation. His name is Alex. 5 years older. And from the moment he drew his first breath, he was the sun our entire family orbited around. That day, my mother, Karen, rolled a brand new mountain bike into our Seattle backyard. It gleamed under the July sun like something out of a commercial. Neighbors clapped. Kids swarmed. Someone yelled that Alex was going to go far in life, and my mother hugged him so tight it looked like she was afraid gravity might take him away. I stood 6 feet back in a faded thrift store t-shirt, holding a cupcake no one had handed me. Not one person asked me to be in the pictures. You know what I remember most? Not the bike. Not even the party. I remember the smell, fresh-cut grass and store-bought frosting. I remember how the sun felt too hot on my shoulders. And I remember my mother's laugh, bright and full, the kind of laugh I'd spend the next 18 years trying to earn and never hearing directed at me. For Alex's birthdays, there were 3-layer cakes, outdoor movie projectors, and entire weekends planned like military operations. For mine, there was a Costco sheet cake, half-melted candles, and my mother apologizing because she'd been so busy. When Alex graduated middle school, he got a trip to Disneyland. When I graduated with honors, I got a Hallmark card left on the kitchen counter with $40 inside and a note that said, "Proud of you, keep it up." The money was still in the envelope. She hadn't even signed it. My mother fought like a lioness to get Alex into an expensive private school across town. Crisp uniforms. New sneakers every season. Soccer leagues. Piano lessons. Summer camps that cost more than our mortgage. I went to the local public school with peeling paint, outdated textbooks, and a gym teacher who doubled as the janitor. When I asked why things were different, my mother would smile and pat my shoulder like I'd asked something adorable. "Alex needs special stimulation, honey. He's really smart, so much potential. You're fine, Emily. You'll be fine." At first, it sounded like a compliment. Slowly, it turned into permission to stop trying. "You'll be fine" became code for "we don't have to care." My father, Mark, worked long hours at a regional bank. Even when he was home, he was a shadow, letting my mother make every decision about schools, activities, money. He'd nod along, kiss her cheek, and disappear into his office or the garage. There was this invisible hierarchy in our house. Alex at the center, shining. My mother orbiting him like a moon. My father somewhere on the outer rings, distant and uninvolved. And me, hovering at the edge of the solar system, cold and ignored, as long as I wasn't causing trouble. By 12, I stopped asking for things. I stopped running into the living room with A+ test papers because every time I did, my mother was on the phone with one of Alex's teachers or driving him to another practice. If I needed extra supplies for school, she'd sigh and ask if I really needed them. For Alex, the answer was always yes. For me, it was always maybe later. So I learned to do things myself. I started watching YouTube videos to teach myself how to cook basic meals. In middle school, I picked up a dishwashing shift at a coffee shop 3 blocks from our house, saving every tip in a jar hidden in my closet. That jar eventually bought my first used laptop. I began noticing every slight, not to wallow in it, but to file it away. Each dismissal became a reason to never, ever depend on them again. At the dinner table, the conversation was always about Alex. His soccer stats. His SAT prep. The colleges courting him. I was there, fork in hand, chewing quietly. But I was never the story. I was set dressing. Somewhere in those years, something in me shifted. I stopped trying to be seen and started building a life that wouldn't require their attention to exist. I didn't know it yet, but all those nights being the invisible kid were doing something important. They were turning into fuel. 3:30 to 6 o'clock college, the breaking point. College was supposed to be my clean break. I got into the University of Washington with a partial scholarship for computer science. When the acceptance email arrived, I sat on the edge of my creaking twin bed and read it 3 times, my hands shaking, tears blurring the screen. I walked downstairs. My mother was folding laundry in the living room, some daytime talk show buzzing in the background. I got in, I said, holding up my phone. UW. Computer science. Partial scholarship. She glanced up, smiled briefly. That's great, honey. Then she asked if I could help her proofread an email to one of Alex's teachers about his recommendation letters. I stood there, phone still raised, smile fading. She'd already looked back at the TV. A week later, Alex got into Stanford. It was like the Super Bowl had relocated to our living room. There was a party. Relatives flew in. Champagne. A custom banner that read "Congratulations Alex, Stanford bound." My mother cried and told everyone her son was going to change the world. When I left for UW 2 months later, my mother hugged me at the curb, told me she was proud, and drove off because she was running late for one of Alex's things. When Alex left for Stanford, she flew down with him, helped him decorate his dorm, and posted 47 photos on Facebook with captions like "My brilliant boy" and "Stanford mom life." My move-in day was 2 suitcases and a used comforter I bought with tip money. I lived in a cramped apartment near campus with 2 roommates I found on Craigslist. You could hear someone cough 3 units over. The heating barely worked. But it was mine. My scholarship covered tuition, not living expenses. To survive, I picked up a job at a Starbucks 4 blocks from campus. I'd wake up at 4:30 a.m., tie on my green apron, and spend 3 hours spelling names wrong on cups, then sprint to my 8 a.m. algorithms lecture smelling like espresso and anxiety. Between classes, I'd sit in the library with my beat-up laptop, watching free coding tutorials on YouTube and Coursera because the official textbooks cost $300 each and I couldn't afford them. While everyone else joined clubs, went to frat parties, and posted aesthetic study photos, I was learning how to build apps in a corner of the library that smelled like old books and regret. I didn't feel sorry for myself. Honestly? It felt good. Like I was building something that belonged only to me. The idea that changed everything started with complaining. My friends were exhausted. They'd pull all-nighters fueled by Red Bull and vending machine Cheetos, skip the gym for weeks, sleep 4 hours a night, and wonder why they felt like zombies. My roommate collapsed on the couch one night and groaned, "I wish something would just tell me when to get off my ass and drink water." I was sitting at our tiny kitchen table, eating instant ramen, halfway through a data structures problem set. And something clicked. What if there was one simple app that tracked the basics: food, movement, sleep, hydration, and nudged people to do better without being annoying or complicated? I grabbed a cheap notebook and started sketching screens. Little graphs for sleep. Color-coded bars for workouts. Reminders that felt like texts from a friend, not alarms from a drill sergeant. I called it HealthTrack. Mostly because every other name I thought of sounded stupid, and that domain was still available for $12. I'd come home from late-night study sessions, make instant noodles, and code until 2 a.m. My eyes burned. My back ached. But every line of code felt like proof I existed. The first version was rough, clunky interface, basic features, but it worked. You could log meals, workouts, water intake, and see your week in simple visual patterns. I gave it to a couple of friends and told them to be brutal. They were. "This button is ugly. I forgot to log because there's no reminder. Why does this chart look like it's from 2005? It stung. But I fixed everything." Little by little, more people started using it. A girl in my stats class told her boyfriend. He told his frat. They told their group chats. Someone left a glowing review that made me cry in the Starbucks bathroom during my shift. When HealthTrack made its first $500 from in-app ads, I stared at the dashboard for 5 full minutes. It wasn't much. But it was more than my family had ever invested in me. I took that money and bought a slightly better used laptop so I could code faster. Around that time, Alex would call from Stanford. He'd talk about frat parties, networking events, entrepreneurship workshops, how insane the tech scene was, how everyone there was going to be a billionaire. My mother would gush. She'd put him on speaker and parade him around like a trophy, asking questions, laughing, promising to help however she could. One night, I tried to tell her about HealthTrack. "I have over 1,000 users now, Mom. People are actually using something I built." There was a pause. "That's nice, sweetie." Then, without a breath, "Did I tell you Alex might get an internship at Tesla? His professor knows someone." I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to her talk about my brother's hypothetical opportunities while my very real app was quietly installing itself on strangers' phones across 3 states. It happened over and over. Every time something went right, a new feature shipped, a class I aced, a spike in downloads, she either didn't ask or pivoted to Alex within seconds. Eventually, I stopped bringing it up. I let her believe I was just doing some computer thing, getting by, surviving. Meanwhile, I kept grinding. I studied during Starbucks breaks. I scribbled code on napkins. I read documentation on my phone while waiting for the bus. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I wasn't even thinking about money yet. I was chasing this electric feeling I got every time someone messaged me, "Hey, this app actually helps. Thank you." I didn't know it then, but those late nights and ignored phone calls were the beginning of something far bigger than a college side project. HealthTrack was quietly growing roots. And so was I. And at some point, those roots were going to push straight through the floorboards of the little box my family had always kept me in. Graduating early wasn't part of some grand plan. It's just what happens when you take maximum credits every semester because you can't afford to stay in school a day longer than necessary. While my classmates debated gap years and backpacking trips through Europe, I signed a lease on a tiny office space in Seattle's tech district. Ugly carpet. Flickering fluorescent lights. A view of a concrete parking lot. To me, it felt like a kingdom. HealthTrack wasn't a side project anymore. I filed the paperwork. Incorporated the company. Opened a business bank account. Moved my entire life into that small room with two mismatched desks and a couch I found on Craigslist that smelled faintly like someone else's dog. My schedule became brutal. Mornings, customer support, user emails, bug fixes. Afternoons, new features, design tweaks, testing. Nights, teaching myself marketing from free podcasts and blog posts, answering every App Store review personally, DMing users who quit to ask why. I begged a designer on Upwork to make the interface look less like something built in a basement. Slowly, the numbers shifted. Downloads weren't a trickle anymore, they were a stream. People started sharing progress screenshots on Instagram. A personal trainer reached out, asking if he could recommend HealthTrack to his clients. Then another. Then a small gym chain asked if we could add a custom onboarding flow for their members. I said yes to everything. I built a premium tier, nothing crazy, just deeper insights and extra features for $4.99 a month. When our annual recurring revenue hit $50,000, I sat in that ugly office and stared at the number on my screen until my vision blurred. It wasn't quit your life money. But it was this is real money. Real enough that I hired 2 junior developers fresh out of school, kids like me who just needed someone to bet on them. We crammed into that tiny space with laptops, cheap coffee, and takeout containers, pushing updates every week like our lives depended on it. Because mine did. Somewhere in the middle of all this, Alex's big Stanford dream started to crack. His first startup, some hyperlocal delivery app that was going to disrupt the logistics space, tanked within 8 months. He burned through $100,000 of my mother's money. Shut it down. Moved back home. My mother called me, voice thick with tears, talking about how hard the world was for her poor boy, how he just needed one good break, how worried she was about his confidence. I'm sure he'll figure it out, I said, stirring instant ramen at my desk. Are you still doing okay? She asked, almost as an afterthought. Yeah. Fine. Good. Alex is going through such a hard time. He's working at Target now, can you believe it? After Stanford. She said it like he'd been sent to war. I didn't mention revenue. I didn't mention employees. It felt pointless. While Alex was stocking shelves and talking about getting back into the startup scene soon, I was negotiating our first major partnerships. A chain of gyms wanted a branded version of HealthTrack. An insurance company reached out about rewarding their members for healthy habits tracked through the app. I was still driving a 2009 Toyota with a dent in the bumper. Still wearing the same sneakers from college. Still eating Chipotle on the office couch. From the outside, I looked like nothing special. Inside my world, everything was shifting. One Tuesday afternoon, an email landed in my inbox from a business development executive at a very large tech company. Subject line, Strategic Partnership Opportunity. Corporate speak 4, we might want to buy you. I walked into that meeting in my only decent blazer, palms sweating, trying not to look like someone who still lived on takeout and survived on 4 hours of sleep. They offered $50 million for HealthTrack. 50. With more zeros than my 8-year-old self holding that plastic cup at Alex's birthday party could have ever imagined. For a moment, I pictured calling my mother. Hearing her finally say, I knew you had it in you, Emily. Then I listened to the rest of the offer. They wanted full control. They wanted to strip out features. They wanted to optimize the monetization funnel, corporate speak for shoving ads into every corner of something users trusted. It felt wrong. I said no. My lawyers nearly choked. But turning down that offer sent a signal into the ecosystem: if one major player wants her, others will too. A local venture capital firm specializing in health tech reached out. They didn't want to buy. They wanted to invest and help us scale without losing our soul. I negotiated hard. Took $8 million. Enough to grow, not enough to lose control. We opened a second office in Portland. Hired more engineers. Expanded into mental health tracking tools. Integrated deeply with Apple Health, Fitbit, Garmin, all the major wearables. We crossed 1 million active users. Annual revenue climbed into 8 figures. At 25, I signed papers on a modest penthouse in Seattle with a view of the water. I filled it with IKEA furniture and plants I mostly forgot to water. I still drove the same beat-up car. Still wore hoodies to work. But my life was no longer small. The offer that eventually stuck didn't come from a flashy tech giant. It came from a massive healthcare conglomerate that wanted to bring preventative wellness into their system. They didn't want to gut the app. They wanted to keep my team, preserve the brand, and use their resources to reach tens of millions more people. They offered $150 million. We negotiated for months, contracts, terms, earnouts, retention bonuses for my team. My days became a blur of video calls, legal documents, and numbers that made my brain short-circuit. When I finally signed, I walked out of that conference room numb. After taxes. After team bonuses. After legal fees. I was left with roughly $90 million. $90 million more than anyone, including me, had ever thought I'd have. I didn't call my mother. Instead, I called a therapist. Sitting in that small, quiet office with soft lighting and a white noise machine humming in the corner, I talked for the first time in my life about what it felt like to be the invisible kid. The "you'll be fine" child. The afterthought. We went through every birthday. Every brushed-off achievement. Every time my mother chose Alex's mediocrity over my excellence. I expected to feel triumphant. Mostly, I felt tired. Sessions turned into months. I started donating to nonprofits, especially ones supporting women who needed access to mental health resources. I realized something that surprised me. I didn't actually need my mother or Alex to clap for me anymore. Their opinion had stopped mattering somewhere along the way. What I did need, though, was closure. Not revenge in the cartoonish sense, not some dramatic scene where I threw money in their faces just to watch them squirm. I needed to know, for my own sanity, what would happen if I walked back into that house not as the invisible daughter, but as the woman they had refused to see. Christmas was coming. And for the first time in years, I found myself looking at flights back to Seattle. My therapist said it plainly, treat it like an experiment. You're not going there to get something from them. You're going to observe. So that's what I told myself. This wasn't a homecoming. It was data collection. I could have driven from Portland to Seattle. But there was something symbolic about flying into the city I grew up in as the founder who'd just sold her company for $150 million. I didn't tell my mother about the sale. I just texted, "Free this year if you still want me there for Christmas." She replied within seconds, more enthusiastic than I'd expected. "Of course. Alex will be here too. It'll be just like old times." Red heart. The heart emoji almost made me laugh. Old times were exactly what I was nervous about. I booked a hotel room near the airport instead of staying at the house. That decision alone felt like drawing a boundary in permanent marker. For years, I'd slept on that sagging twin mattress in my childhood bedroom, peeling posters, borrowed library books, the faint smell of old carpet. This time, I wanted a door I could close that wasn't hers. On Christmas Eve, I landed in the gray Seattle afternoon. Clouds heavy. Air wet and familiar. I checked into the hotel, dropped my suitcase, and stood there for a minute in the clean, anonymous room. White sheets. Neutral art. No ghosts. The next day, I drove my rental car to my mother's house. The neighborhood looked smaller somehow. Same cracked sidewalks. Same sad little park at the end of the street. Her house still had the faded blue paint. The overwatered lawn. The only difference was a plastic reindeer on the lawn, one antler bent at a tragic angle. My heart picked up as I walked up the front steps. Not fear. Stage fright. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there in a floral apron, cheeks flushed from oven heat, the smell of roasting turkey rolling out behind her. For a split second, I saw the mom I used to chase with drawings and test scores. Then the moment passed. She pulled me into a quick, polite hug. "Emily, you look so grown up," she said, stepping back to evaluate my coat, my shoes, my face, like she was appraising a stranger. "How's work? Still doing your computer stuff?" "Yeah," I said, shrugging. "Still doing my computer stuff." She nodded like that answered everything and immediately launched into an update about Alex. "He's doing so much better. This new business idea he has, it's amazing. He's really turning things around." Her eyes lit up in a way they never did for me. "You'll see. He's been working so hard. I'm just so proud of him." I stepped inside. The house smelled like nutmeg, sugar, and dish soap. The same artificial Christmas tree stood in the corner, loaded with mismatched ornaments and blinking lights. Framed photos lined the walls and shelves, Alex in his football uniform. Alex at Stanford. Alex in a suit at some networking event. None of me. Not one. I spotted a picture from childhood, Alex on that mountain bike in the backyard, my mother's arm around him, both of them grinning. I was in the frame too, blurry on the edge, half cut off. I almost smiled. "Alex," my mother called toward the living room. "Your sister's here." He was sprawled on the couch watching an NFL game, beer in hand, one sock on, one off, classic Alex. He muted the TV and stood up, giving me a once-over. "Well, if it isn't the coding queen," he said with a crooked grin. "Still single? Still buried in your little app thing?" I could feel my mother watching, waiting for me to laugh it off like I used to. I just smiled. "Nice to see you too, Alex." I followed my mother into the kitchen. She handed me a dish towel like nothing had changed. "Can you help with the salad? We're doing the cranberry one you liked when you were little." She was already turning back to baste the turkey. She poured a glass of wine for Alex, then one for herself. She didn't offer me any, just gestured vaguely toward the tap like she always had. It was such a small thing. But it was all there, the invisible ranking, the automatic deference to him, the assumption that I didn't need what he did. I chopped vegetables, listening to them talk about his big plans, how she was going to help him get this one off the ground for real this time. No one asked if I'd driven or flown. Where I was living now. What my days looked like. I realized I didn't care. I wasn't that kid anymore, waiting for a turn. I was taking mental notes. When my mother finally called us to the table, my pulse picked up again. The plates were set the same way they'd always been, Alex at one end, my mother nearest to him, me off to the side. I sat down in my old spot. But I wasn't the same person this time. I wasn't here to disappear. I was here to see what happened when the ghost finally decided to speak. Dinner started exactly the way it always had. Every ounce of attention aimed at Alex. My mother passed him the mashed potatoes first. Laughed at every half-baked joke. Asked about his big new venture like he'd already IPO'd. He launched into a rambling explanation about an online sports gear store. "The market's wide open, Mom. I just need a little capital to get it off the ground." My mother nodded, eyes shining. "And of course, I told him I'd help," she said, glancing at me like she expected approval. "A little push now, and he'll be unstoppable." I took a sip of water. Kept my face neutral. The conversation rolled past me like I wasn't there. They bounced from his business idea to his workout routine to some guy he knew who almost got signed to the NFL. I could have been a piece of furniture. When my mother finally turned to me, it was with the same half-interested tone she'd use on a telemarketer. "So, Emily," she said, cutting into her turkey, "you're still doing your computer job, right? Working on that app?" I set my fork down. The weight of the moment hovered just out of reach. I could have said everything right then. Instead, I shrugged. "Yeah. Still working on it." She smiled, relieved she didn't have to follow up. "As long as you're managing to pay your bills, that's what matters," she said, like I was a teenager babysitting for gas money. Alex smirked, swirling his wine. Come on, Mom, he said. You know Emily. She's fine. She's got her little project. His eyes flicked to me. That condescending glint I'd seen since we were kids. Then he said it. So, are you still wasting your time on that worthless company of yours? Worthless. There it was. The word I'd been carrying in my chest for months. I didn't flinch. Didn't roll my eyes. Didn't snap back. I just looked at him and said, casually, like I was commenting on the weather. Actually, I sold my company. The room went so quiet I could hear the hum of the fridge in the next room. My mother froze, fork halfway to her mouth. Alex let out a short, disbelieving laugh. What, he said. You sold it? He did the air quotes. The same ones he'd done when we were kids. To who? A healthcare group, I said. They bought HealthTrack. Saying the name out loud in that house, for the first time, felt strange. Like introducing a stranger to a family that had spent decades pretending I didn't exist. Alex snorted. Okay, so what did you get? Like, what, a couple $100,000? Enough to finally move out of your little shoebox apartment? His face was flushed now. Half from wine. Half from the assumption that he was still above me, no matter what I said. How much did you sell it for? He pressed. Exactly? My mother was staring at me now, eyes wide. Yes, she said softly. How much? I met his eyes. Saw the challenge there. The assumption that he was still the star, still the one who mattered, no matter what I'd built in the shadows. I let a beat of silence stretch out. Let the tension hum and crackle in the air. Then I said, clear and steady. $150 million. His jaw literally dropped. It wasn't just a figure of speech. His mouth fell open like someone had severed the connection between his brain and his body. The fork slipped from my mother's hand and clattered against her plate with a crack that echoed. Her face drained of color so fast it was almost surreal, like someone had yanked a plug and all the blood left at once. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The Christmas lights blinked red, green. The turkey sat there steaming. Then everything happened at once. That's not funny, Emily, my mother whispered, voice shaking. That's not a nice joke. You're lying, Alex snapped, recovering his voice. You're not that smart. Nobody pays that kind of money for some stupid phone app. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Unlocked it. Turned the screen toward them. I'd left my banking app open. Because some part of me knew this would happen. The balance stared back at them, a number so long it barely fit on one line. This is after taxes, I said quietly. After paying my team. After everything. My mother leaned in, eyes darting over the digits, lips moving as she tried to count the commas. Alex grabbed the phone from her, hands trembling, scrolling like he was looking for some hidden punchline. When that didn't satisfy him, he snatched up his own phone and started typing furiously. A few seconds later, I watched my own face appear reflected in his glasses. A press photo from an article. His eyes scanned the headline. I already knew what it said. I'd read it alone at 2 a.m. weeks ago, sitting on my couch with a glass of wine I didn't finish. 26-year-old founder sells mental health app for $150 million. There it was. In black and white. He scrolled. I heard him mutter fragments under his breath. Under 30. Fastest growing, mental health features. He stopped reading. Looked up at me. Like he was seeing a stranger. My mother's eyes were wet now. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, voice breaking. How could you keep something like that from your own family? I let out a short breath. Almost a laugh. You mean the way you kept everything for Alex? I said. My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't stop it. The private school. The trips. The $100,000 you gave him for a startup that failed within a year. The way you forgot my birthdays or threw me a grocery store cake while you flew down to help him move into Stanford. Her mouth opened. Closed. No sound came out. That's not fair, she finally managed. We did our best. We supported you. We always. No, Mom. I cut her off. You supported him. You invested in him. You built your entire life around him. My hands were steady on the table. You told me I'd be fine and then acted like that meant you didn't have to try. You made sure he had every chance, every safety net, every excuse. I leaned forward slightly. I built everything I have without a single one of those things. You don't get to play the victim now because the invisible child turned out to be the one who actually did something. Alex slammed his fist on the table. Glasses jumped. So what? He shouted. You think you're better than us now? You think money makes you special? You're still the same weird little sister who ate lunch alone and hid in her room. You just got lucky. I stood up slowly. My napkin fell from my lap onto the floor. My heart wasn't racing. It was strangely calm. Like this scene had been rehearsed 1,000 times in my head, and I was just hitting my marks. Luck didn't write a single line of code, I said. Luck didn't answer customer emails at 3 in the morning. Luck didn't turn down a $50 million offer because it wasn't right. Luck didn't clean up your messes, Alex. I looked at my mother. Really looked at her. She looked small. Defeated. Like the foundation she'd built her world on had cracked straight down the middle. You gambled everything on the wrong child, I said softly. And now you're just angry that the one you ignored learned how to win without you. My mother reached out like she was going to grab my wrist. Emily, wait. We can talk about this. Maybe you could help Alex. Invest in his idea. We're family. We should stick together. There it was. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just, help Alex. The hierarchy she'd built was so deep in her bones, she didn't even hear herself. I picked up my phone. Slid it into my pocket. I did stick together, I said. 4 years. You just never noticed. I pushed my chair back from the table. The Christmas lights blinked lazily in the window behind them, casting red and green shadows across their stunned faces. Enjoy dinner, I added. Merry Christmas. And then I walked out. Out of the dining room. Out of the house I grew up in. Out of the story they'd written for me. Leaving my mother pale and speechless, my brother stunned into silence, and 20 years of being invisible sitting at that table behind me. 16 to 1800 hours the fallout and freedom. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It was more like a slow-motion collapse, one brick at a time. I went back to my hotel that night, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the bed in the dark, staring at the Seattle skyline through the window. I half expected my phone to explode immediately. It didn't. The first wave hit the next morning. Long, rambling texts from my mother about family and misunderstandings, mixed with thinly veiled accusations that I had humiliated my brother on purpose, that I was being cruel and selfish. A few hours later, Alex chimed in. Called me ungrateful. Accused me of turning my back on the people who raised you. I didn't answer. 2 days after Christmas, a letter arrived. From a lawyer. Representing both of them. Demanding $3 million as compensation for the years of support, housing, food, and education they'd provided. Reading it felt like watching someone put a price tag on a childhood they'd barely shown up for. I handed it to my own attorney. He wrote back in language much colder than I ever could have managed. Politely declined. Then attached a detailed breakdown my accountant had pulled together, every tuition payment for Alex, every check written for his failed startup, every major expense with his name on it. And a big fat zero next to mine. At the end, he added that if they pursued their claim, we'd have no choice but to make those records part of the public record. The next message I got was short. Frantic. We're dropping it. Let's just forget the lawyers. No apology. Just retreat. Somewhere in the middle of that mess, Alex's life started to unravel. He was already fragile, furious that I'd passed him in a race he didn't even know we were running. He drank more. Showed up late to his shifts at Best Buy. Snapped at a customer one afternoon. The customer recorded the whole meltdown on their phone. The video hit a local Facebook group. People connected the dots between the ranting guy in the blue polo and the online posts he'd made trashing his rich, ungrateful sister. A week later, he was fired. His big idea for an online sports gear store never got off the ground. Between credit card debt and a small business loan he didn't understand, he sank fast. My mother tried to save him the way she always had, refinancing the house, pouring whatever savings she had left into his black hole. It still wasn't enough. Within a year, the house I grew up in was gone. Sold to cover debts. My mother moved into a small apartment across town. Her health started to decline, stress, high blood pressure, sleepless nights. Relatives who'd watched her worship Alex for years quietly pulled away when they realized how badly she'd misplayed her hand. That next Christmas, I was in Hawaii. A small group of friends from the tech world. We swam, hiked, watched the sunset from a balcony overlooking the ocean. At some point, I wired a sizable donation to a nonprofit that funds therapy for women who can't afford it. It felt right. My phone buzzed with a message from a younger cousin. She'd seen the article about me. She wrote that my story made her feel less crazy for being the overlooked kid in her own house. I invited her to call me anytime she wanted to talk about careers, money, or just life. She did. I became the mentor I'd needed at 16. Months later, an envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a handwritten letter from my mother. She said she was sorry. Sorry she'd favored Alex. Sorry she hadn't seen me. Sorry it had taken a headline about millions of dollars for her to realize what she'd thrown away. She wrote that she wished she could go back. That she hoped one day I would forgive her. That maybe we could start over. I read it once. Then again. I didn't frame it. I didn't rip it up. I just put it in a drawer. The truth was, I'd already done the forgiving that mattered. I'd forgiven myself for not being able to fix her. I didn't send money. I didn't rush back in to rescue them. Setting boundaries was the only way to keep from becoming another one of their bad investments. I poured my time into my next company, this one focused on mental health, AI tools that help people check in with themselves, catch warning signs, build better habits. I told parts of my story on conference stages. Eventually in a TEDx-style talk. Not as a victory lap, but as a cautionary tale about what happens when a family builds their world around one golden child and treats the other like a backup plan. Here's what I learned. The part one hope sticks with you more than the dollar amount ever could. Your worth is not determined by how loudly your parents clap for you, how much they spend on you, or whether they ever admit they were wrong. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop standing in front of people who refuse to see you, and build a life where you no longer need their approval to breathe. Favoritism doesn't just hurt the kid who gets ignored. It cripples the kid who gets worshipped, too. My mother lost her house. My brother lost his job, his excuses, his safety net. I lost the fantasy that one day they'd wake up and magically become the people I needed them to be. In exchange, I got something better. A life I chose. Built on my own terms. Full of people who actually show up. If you've ever been the invisible one, the you'll be fine child, maybe you don't have millions or a headline. But you do have a choice. You can keep waiting for them to see you. Or you can start seeing yourself. Now, when I sit in my Seattle apartment and watch the sun slide over the skyline, I don't feel bitterness. Just calm. I learned that saying no isn't cruelty, it's self-respect. Silence doesn't mean being unseen. It means being free. If you've ever been the one holding your family together while they tore you apart, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what line you finally had to draw. What was your $150 million moment, the truth you finally spoke that changed everything? And if this story hit home, subscribe. Because there's more to come. Stories about finding your voice, standing your ground, and rewriting what family means on your own terms. You're not alone in this. And you never were.